Hello and welcome back to 100 Days of Clarity, day 14. Today, we're compounding our knowledge that we've been building off last time, and we are introducing one of the big three general conditionals. And so again, a little bit of a caveat here. We've actually already seen a few conditionals such as the and, or, we also saw is equal in the last video. And so this time around, we're going to introduce one of the big three general conditionals that are used whenever you want to pass through a custom expression to evaluate the true or false. Okay, so the first one is one that if you're familiar with programming at all, you've heard of, but it's actually the one that you should use the least. And I get why you'll want to use it. It's the most straightforward. It makes the most sense. It's the one that we're not going to use as often. And so the first one is if. Simple if statement. If some condition evaluates to true, do these things. If it evaluates to false, do these things. Really straightforward. The next two conditionals, one is called asserts and one is called match. Today, we're going to focus solely on asserts. And so when do you use asserts? Asserts is conditional that you want to use whenever you want the fail scenario to result in an error and to result in the transaction itself being canceled. So you want to use asserts when, for security reasons or any critical reason, you need a fail situation to absolutely cancel the entire transaction. And again, compare this to last time, right? We saw is equals. And if you get false on is equals, it just responds false. Whenever we use asserts, if we threw an is equal in there and the is equal returned false, the behavior of the asserts is that it would cancel not just that line of code, it would cancel everything that's happened up in this transaction. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump back into it. Let's open up our IDE and comment in day 14 conditionals. And we're just going to call this one and in parentheses asserts. Okay. And as usual, whenever we want to use a define read only, whenever we want to test something simple, just use define read only. And let's say, show asserts. And we're actually going to provide a parameter here so we can see what happens when it passes and when it fails. And we'll call this num uint. And for the assert statement, we're just going to make a simple greater than less than comparison. So asserts, as you can see by the preview here, for our expression, we just want to do greater than, and we're going to say is num greater than u2. And that's it. As you can see, asserts provided us with a second parameter, though, which was the error message that we want to throw. You can put in whatever you want in here, but for now, let's just put in u1 as a number. And if we save here, even though we're not writing to clarity, this is still going to fail. And as you see, we indeed get an error message. Why? Well, if you read the error message, it says it detected two execution paths, returning two different expression types. So one type is response unknown type uint. The second is Boolean. Okay, well, the Boolean is pretty simple, right? Because whenever we use a greater than or less than, the return of that is a Boolean, true or false. Okay, so we know that the other response type where it says response unknown type uint, that must be referring to error u1. And indeed it is. And so to fix this, again, we need to make sure that the execution path for both the true or false are the same. And since asserts forces you to use the error message, or for asserts, you almost always will use the error message on the right, and that's an error type of response, then to make sure that the execution path is parallel, then we need to have an OK response as well. And so to fix this, we can actually just simply wrap this in an OK message. And we save, and we see that does indeed work. So if we go back to Clarinet console, let's go ahead and run this guy and call show asserts. And we're going to pass in show asserts. First, we're going to pass in a number that is definitely greater than U2, so U3. And we don't expect to just get true, but we expect to get okay true, which indeed it does. And if we call this function again, show asserts, but we pass in U1, we should get error U1, which indeed it does. So that's asserts in a nutshell. It's simple because, again, it's a conditional, but the tricky part of the conditionals in Clarity is knowing when to use which one. Again, I know it won't seem this way at first, but if you're using if, you're most likely not using the right conditional. What you're trying to reach for is asserts and match. Again, not always, definitely not always, but the majority of the time, the behavior you're looking for in Clarity is very specific. And the more specific you can use your conditionals, the cleaner the behavior, the easier it is for other developers to read it, etc. Okay, and before we wrap this day up, because again, today's going to be on the short side, we're going to show a little bit more about the error types and specifically how users use error types. Or sorry, how developers use error types in Clarity. Most of the time, when you open up a contract, you'll notice at the top they have almost like a list of defined constants that have error types that are usually something like this. Error too large. And then the expression is just error U1. And then contracts will have a few of these, right? Because again, there's a lot of errors that can go wrong in contracts. Error too large, error too small, or maybe even error not auth for not authorized. That's a valid way of writing constants. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to write another asserts function, but this time we're going to write it and then plug in one of these defined constant error messages that we have. And in fact, we're going to do another admin check function. But before we do, I want to show you guys a little trick here. Just how we can define constant for a lot of things. You can also define an admin constant by writing in txsender. And again, this is an error message because we already defined constant in the contract above. So I'm going to call this admin1. And what's happening here is the moment you deploy that contract, the address that deployed that contract is at that point the person that signed that transaction by deploying it. And so when the contract evaluates this for the first time and it reads defined constant txsender, it's going to save that principal address as the txsender and as admin1 in this case. So now let's go ahead and write in our define read only function and write in check admin. And in the body, all we're going to have is an asserts. Again, we know this needs to be wrapped in an OK, at least in this instance. And then asserts, we're going to do is equal. And we're checking if the person that signed this transaction, so txsender, the principal that called it, is equal to who we saved as an admin earlier, admin1. And then for our error message, we're going to replace this entire second half with the much cleaner error not auth and save. Okay, as you can see, we got an error message somewhere, but I can't really tell where. Unchecked name already used. Okay, check admin. So it seems we're already using the name check admin. So let's just call this assert admin. Okay, and that gets rid of our error message. So now we're going to go back to Clarinet console and just make sure this assert admin function is working well. And again, since we're calling Clarinet, that first address that we the user act as deploys the contract. Therefore, right now admin is saved as this first address. So if we go ahead and call this function just as this first address, which was saved as admin1, this will work and it will return OK, true. But if we go ahead and change who the TX sender is in this dummy blockchain, and again, let's change it to the second address. And now we run assert admin, we indeed get an error message. Actually, interesting, we got an error message because we're not referring to the right contract anymore, because again, we've now switched principles. So I'm going to go ahead and copy paste the literal up here. And let's just try this function again. Contract call, question mark, apostrophe, the contract name, then assert admin. And if we run that, we indeed get error U3. If we go back to our contract and we were to just search, hey, what is error U3? We would see that we got error not authorized. And yeah, in that case, if we had a function in which this asserts was anywhere in the middle, bottom, or etc., if this asserts failed, again, it wouldn't just return a false, it would error out and it would revert anything that's happened up to that point. So asserts is the conditional you want to use when you need to be the most secure and make sure that the fail scenario actually fails entirely out. And with that being said, I think we're on minute 11, minute 12. Seems like the right length to call it for now. So yeah, thank you for day 14. I will see you tomorrow, day 15, which is actually going to be the very last day before we write a full-fledged smart contract. So exciting stuff. Stay tuned, and I will see you tomorrow.